Hello and welcome to episode number 24 of Kit Room. There's a few things you may notice. Yes, I've had a haircut, good eye. But also I'm hands-free. I don't have a handheld microphone today. So I said to the home kit that I'd do the Viking clap. That's what you're getting. Welcome, episode number 24, otherwise known as episode number Javier Guerrero. Yes, I had to Google to find out who has been number 24. Turns out it's not a very popular number in Brazil, which I need to do more reading on that. It sounded pretty homophobic. Anyway, before I go into any more of that, who is the guest who sat opposite me? So, Mr. Guest, if you'd just like to introduce yourself, who are you and what do you do in the space of football shirt things?
I am Rob Warner. I previously designed football kits for a number of years for brands including Puma and Umbro. And now I run a design agency and I'm also the co-principal of the Spark Design Academy. And our first course is teaching people how to design football kits like the professionals.
You have featured on many things. I know Classic Football Shirts have had you on a few times, mainly speaking about the 2006 Italy kit, right?
Yep.
And I think have you been on the Cult Kit podcast as well?
Yes.
Yeah, they're the two that I know about. You could have been on others, but I'm sorry.
There's been a few. Man Marking was the other one, which I don't know if you're familiar with them. They cover men's mental health through the lens of football.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, really interesting. So they've had like journalists, ex-pros, and then somehow I ended up on it as well. But yeah, slightly different slant on the usual chat.
Yeah, we're going to try and obviously we will have to touch on the Italy kit at some point but I'm sure you're asked about that all the time. So let's go rogue and let's ask about things that might put you in some hot water now. So before we jump into your career, let's find out about how you got into football. So as you can probably guess, audience, by his accent, where did you grow up?
Tropical Sutton Coldfield, the West Midlands premier resort.
The lovely seaside. No. And how did you get into football? And you're a Villa fan, right?
Yeah, totally. So kind of my background with why I ended up as a Villa fan rather than the other team in the city was it's long in the family history. So my grandparents were season ticket holders in like the 1920s and 30s, and then my dad started going with them when he was a little boy, and then when I was about 7 he started to take me. So me and my dad only had a season ticket together for like a season and a half relatively recently, probably about 10 years ago. But prior to that, because he was working Saturdays largely, so he introduced me to it and then left me to get on with it.
Introduce you to football or Villa or both?
Well, to Villa predominantly. I guess football, I don't remember a particular moment. It was just always around me. I've got an older brother as well, 10 years older than me, who was a big Villa fan. So yeah, it was kind of football was always around me. I can't imagine a time when it wasn't. And then, yeah, going to the match with my dad. I think the first game I went to was we'd just been relegated and Coventry had just won the FA Cup. So, I mean, how the tables have turned since then, but we played a pre-season friendly against them under Graham Taylor. And so I went to that. I think we beat them as well. And yeah, it's all been an emotional roller coaster ever since.
In terms of kits, did you get many Villa kits as a kid, or is this, or did you get into the kit game quite late? Because I did. I used to get City shirts, but outside of anything City, I didn't get until. I mean, there's just a couple behind me, but until now.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was definitely Villa kits to begin with. So my first one would have been that year, actually, the 1987-88 Hummel kit. But I mean, football shirts have always been quite expensive. People look back and say, oh, well, they were only 30 quid. It's all they were, but that was, still a fair amount of money at the time. So for me, it was a Christmas present every year rather than something I would expect to get in the summer when they were launched. So I remember my first ever Hummel Villa shirt, and I took a marker pen to it and drew a number 8 on the back. which was probably my first ever experience of kind of football kit design. And then as I got a little bit older and started having a bit of spending money, and by a little bit older, maybe age like 11, I'd start picking up shirts from other teams. There was a place in Birmingham city centre when I was a little bit older still that would sell dead stock of anything they could get their hands on related to sportswear. So I picked up a Dortmund shirt and a few other things. But the first two I remember grabbing were, there was a big football exhibition at the NEC. And I got my hands on an Ajax shirt and a Milan shirt as well from around about 1990. I've actually got them sitting next to me somewhere on this enormous pile of shirts, which I don't know if I'm supposed to be showing you shirts yet, but
I mean, it's fine.
We'll do it. Yeah, right. So let's go with it.
It's natural.
So we have got this very famous Van Basten, Rijkaard, Hullet era polyester beauty from Adidas. Where was this made? Made in Italy as well. So that'd retail at about 400 quid if it was brand new now. And then we've got a made in England Umbro Ajax shirt with a very worn out number 8 on the back. I don't know what I think. The reason why I've always gone for number 8 was because David Platt was my hero when he was playing for Villa, and that was his shirt number. So I've always had a preference for number 8s, strangely.
Yeah, I mean, so I, viewers who don't know or listeners who don't know, I currently live in Birmingham, and there is nowhere to buy football shirts. So there's usually Sports Direct, and I believe there's Brum Vintage, which he sells some shirts, but I'm yet to find him. Don't know where he is. Apparently he's got a market stall in the Rag Market. No idea. So it's a bit of a shame. There was an Adidas shop here, closed. So I'm always on the hunt for more, but I'm very jealous to know that there was a shop here that did dead stock, and it's probably just faded into the history.
Yeah, it was in a really prominent position as well. It wasn't too far from New Street Station. So I suppose selling £3 Leicester City shirts and whatever else was never going to keep him open for very long.
Yeah, I mean, jumping back to how you got into football and saying it was kind of natural, I suppose thinking about it, there's really like 3 big hubs of football in the UK. You've got London with many teams, the Northwest and Midlands, where there's 2 in the cities you mentioned, and just outside you've got Wolves, West Brom, Coventry, Leicester. So I imagine like it's hard to grow up in the UK without coming across football at some point in your life.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and they've all had some nice kits as well. What I did want to mention, actually, I mentioned to you before we started recording that I lived in Perry Bar, and you mentioned that you went to Villa Park. I will try and save the video and put a clip of my first attendance at Villa Park here.
Yeah.
But what happened was, I got my 2015. Yeah, it was a 15-16 season. My partner got me that season's City shirt in the summer, and I was in the queue, and there was about 20 people behind me, and we were getting shirt prints. And he was like, okay, who do you want? And I panicked and said, Delph, because I liked Delph when he was at Villa. I thought he was a very good player, and I was happy we signed him. But I got this shirt under the impression I'd be going to uni in Salford. Yeah, I didn't get into Salford. I went through clearing and ended up in Birmingham. Right. So I didn't wear that shirt very much.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, it's still not really very fondly remembered now.
I did go to, I think we played Villa in the FA Cup that season, and I managed to get a ticket, and they brought him on, and it was a very hostile reception.
Yeah, I kind of feel, excuse me, I kind of feel sorry for him to a certain extent, because, if you set the allegiance of football fans aside and just think of him as a human with a job, then, he agonised over that decision. He wasn't sitting there thinking, I'll wind the fans up and say, no, I'm staying. And then, then I'll change my mind a few days later. He's, if anything, it suggested his affinity to Villa, that at least he was really genuinely in 2 minds about whether to leave. And from a purely career perspective, why wouldn't he leave? It'd have been mad to stay. So, I kind of feel sorry for him, but also, yeah, he's a snake, whatever.
There were many inflatable snakes at the time. Someone was wearing one on the head. It was pretty funny. So your working life, you mentioned there drawing a number 8 was your first step into design. How did you get into that? Did you study something at university, or how did you fall into it?
Yeah, I did. I mean, if I think back to, and I hadn't really realised until much later that was something I did as a kid, but I was always drawing football kits, drawing trainers, and I never really, I kind of did it up until about the age of 13, and then discovered more kind of teenage appropriate pursuits, whatever they may have been, and just forgot that that's what I used to do. And then I was at grammar school, so my career path should really have been like accountant or doctor or, pharmacist or something like that. But still had this desire to create things. So studied CDT up to A level, and that was more product design focused. But I got into fashion through, we had a guy came in from Bernardo's children's charity and showed us a video about how kids were suffering, and gave us these little green pin badges to sell. And he was like, you sell all 10 of them, we'll raise £10. And it just felt like not enough. It really struck me quite hard, this video. So almost like a 20 years early, probably not that much, but certainly an early precursor of the in-betweeners. I put on a catwalk show at school, and raised over £500 for Bernardo's instead of a tenner, but also got introduced to some local designers in the fashion industry, and just got a real taste for it from that. And I'd never thought about kind of sportswear and fashion design being connected or being the same thing. But yeah, it turned out they were. So I then decided for university to apply to study fashion design, but was still massively influenced by football and sport. At that point, David Beckham was really emerging as being a fashion icon as well as a sporting icon. He was wearing Prada Sport, and that was emerging as a brand. And so that crossover between fashion and sport was really starting to happen right there. And yeah, for me, it was always then going to be something I would hope to pursue. I remember, I think in my first year or second year at university, doing a project, and it was, you could design whatever you want was the brief. And I designed a sportswear collection. I got slammed by my lecturer with like, that's sportswear is not fashion. It's quite nice to look back now and think about the experiences I've had over the last 20 years and be like, yeah, it turns out it is fashion. So there you go.
Well, no, agreed. I think it is, but I'm not the most fashionable of people. But you look at the Nigeria training range for the last 2 releases of kits, and the leisure wear from that was wiped out immediately.
Yeah, totally.
So they were wrong. But so you mentioned at university. I went to Birmingham City University, and the first episode of Kitted Out podcast I did was on, I'm going to bring it over, was on this number.
Yeah.
The Cameroonian One Piece from 2004, for those who are listening audio-wise. So as part of this episode, because this is I think they only did player issue versions, I bought this from the Classic Football Shirts Fabric of Football event in London. So I contacted one of the fashion lecturers from university who had a background in sports design, and I gave her this. I gave it for a week, and then sat down at the end of the week and had an interview on it. And she hated it. She hated it with every fibre of her being. She didn't get the point in it or anything like that. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, and I guess, if you were purely looking at it from a fashion perspective, you probably wouldn't get the point of it. Same as if you were looking at a Formula One car and thinking it'd be quite impractical to park at Tesco. With that, it was all about reducing shirt pulling. If you think of that era of kind of late 90s, early 2000s shirts, the silhouettes were still big. The guys were in quite loose fitting shirts. And Kappa had made the move towards that already, and we were like, well, how can we take it a step further? And to eradicate shirt pulling, because particularly with Cameroon at that time, they've got some very quick footballers. If you think of kind of very young Samuel Eto'o and Patrick Mbomar and some of the other players that got in and around the squad at that point, they were all quite quick. And so the best advantage for them was nobody being able to pull them back. So consequently, we did something that was tight fitting. We opted away. So the reason the shorts are 2 layers rather than it just being one tight fitting piece is obviously for modesty purposes. You know, if you're an Olympic sprinter, then you can wear your Lycra one piece and be fairly confident that you'll still get a good reception from the crowd because they're there to see sporting history. Whereas if you were playing an away game and you walked out in a one piece, there's a fairly high likelihood that opposition supporters might see it as an opportunity.
So, gonna just go on a bit of a tangent on that kit. Did you have a hand in the design, or were you just aware of it going on?
Oh, yeah, no. So at that point, I joined Puma at the end of 2001, and was the only football shirt designer at that point. And then very quickly, we needed to expand the team. So there was about 3 of us by then. So the vast majority of the design work was done by a guy called Sam Stevenson. And so he was, you know, if I was to put my hand on it, it was his shirt, but I was the kind of the design manager at that point and overseeing all of our output around football. And so I was involved in some of the fittings and the design sign off. I designed the typeface that ended up going on the back of it. And the furry cats as well that are on it. So the cat logos aren't thin. They've got quite a high pile compared to like normal. Have they got a high pile or is that an embroidered one? It should be a high pile thing.
Let's have a look. It looks, if it'll focus, not on me.
Yeah, that's the right one. That's the right. Originally, they were going to be like really quite hairy. We scaled it back a little bit. But yeah, so I was involved in it, but it was definitely Sam's, you know, it should go down in history as being Sam's work.
What, if you remember and if you can talk about it, what did the players think of it? Because I've often thought about like being for the African Cup of Nations, it being admittedly in their winter, but it's still going to be warm. Just clambering around in the changing rooms, trying to pull that over you. What were their opinions on it?
Loved it.
Did they?
Yeah, and I think, you know, and when we got into designing for 2006, and the brief for 2006 was help players get to the ball faster, and that was it. It was as open as that. So we were thinking about weight, aerodynamics, moisture wicking, quick drying, anti-shirt pulling, so many different aspects, but also the psychology of the athletes was really important to us. And so thinking to that kit, again, a Cameroon team at the time, they were all amazing athletes, you know, in really, really prime physical condition, and suited skin tight product. So psychologically for them, walking out onto the field in that, they'd already got a little bit of an advantage on some of the opposition because of what it is. There's a famous story about, if you remember Kathy Freeman, that was a runner for the Australian Olympic team. She was a Nike athlete and she broke the 400 meters world record in the Nike Swift suit. I think that was at the 2004 Olympics. And it had got a hood and everything. And she famously was really reluctant to wear it. And she was supposed to wear it in all the qualifiers and didn't. And her husband, I think, had said to her, look, you know, if you're not comfortable, don't wear it. It's important that you win this event. So psychologically, she thought that she'd be too self-conscious wearing it. It would put her off. And then for the final, she kind of flipped her thinking and was like, if I walk out in this, people are already going to feel half beaten, like I've got an advantage. And so she gave her a psychological lift and likely, you know, did the opposite to the other competitors. And consequently, she smashed the world record. And so that as well influenced our thinking going into 2006, where that skin tight all-in-one kit, you know, albeit it was banned by 2006, but certainly the skin tight approach looked great on Cameroon. But if we'd put that on the Czech Republic with Jan Koller and Thomas Rositzky, it's going to have the opposite the opposite effect. You know, they're not going to, great athletes in their own right, but neither of them with a physique that would, you know, be intimidating in a skin tight shirt. So we had to figure out what was the right balance between getting the aerodynamics right from a fit perspective, but also without leaving the athletes feeling a little bit self-conscious with what they were wearing. But the Cameroon lads were always up for anything. I mean, the approval process with them was typically you presented it to the players first, and if they liked it, it was a given then that it'd get sign off from management. So when I arrived at Puma, the Sleeveless was already designed and ready to go. So that launched at the Cup of Nations and then got banned. So one of my first things was figuring out how we were going to put sleeves on a sleeveless shirt and make it still look sleeveless. So we ended up with the black mesh sleeves that we put on it for the World Cup. And then we went through the process with the all-in-one, which got banned as well. And so by 2006, you know, it was a big deal in as far as Cameroon were concerned. They had 2 kits banned. There was still some expectation for them as a team that they would do well at the World Cup. And so we went to present it to the players, and they all loved the 2006 shirt. And then we presented it to the head of the federation, and he was like, you know, because the last 2 have been banned, we need you to come down to Yaoundé and present it to the government to get it signed off. And we didn't, or I certainly didn't go on that trip. I think Johan from the sports marketing team had to go down to Cameroon and present it to like the Prime Minister or whatever.
Wow.
Because they were just so conscious that, you know, the stuff, and we were like, this one won't get banned. It's just a green shirt with a lion on it. But yeah, they were quite nervous about it.
So with obviously you mentioned FIFA weren't happy with it, and I covered it in the episode of Kitted Out that they were pretty livid about it. I think the best response I saw was, I can't remember the exact quote, but someone saying that they're getting annoyed about something that can easily be solved with a pair of scissors or something like that. Do you think they had a bit of a sour taste in their mouth from the vest kit 2 years prior, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think over the last 12 or 18 months, we've probably, as a society, been exposed to more conspiracy theories than ever, you know, around various goings on. And one particular conspiracy theory at that time that, you know, I wouldn't necessarily subscribe to, but something that was talked about by certain people, was that because Adidas and FIFA had such a strong tie-up, that apparently Adidas had been working on a sleeveless shirt for the World Cup. And because we launched it early at the Cup of Nations, there was a bit of pressure to get it banned. And then the same with the all-in-one was because obviously Puma and Adidas are in the same little town in Germany, very small town. Everybody mixes together. And so word on the street was that they were also working on an all-in-one kit for the World Cup. And I forget whether we were originally planning to launch it at the World Cup and pulled it early or not. But either way, obviously we launched it early. And lo and behold, it got banned again. And on neither occasion was it against the rules. The rules were changed after the event.
Yeah, that was the main bit of reading I read about that kit being banned. And I'm still livid it was. Although I think with it being banned, it's kind of made it go down as a bit of a cult classic.
Yeah, totally. And there was a little bit of a happy ending because Cameroon got, they were docked 6 points from their World Cup qualifying campaign for wearing it at the Cup of Nations. And Puma actually took FIFA to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland because Cameroon had the 6 points docked and got fined. And the CAS actually ruled that it wasn't against the rules. It was a legal kit. They shouldn't have been sanctioned for it. So the 6 points were given back and the fine was paid back, and Puma matched the amount of the fine and put it all together and put it into grassroots football in Cameroon.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was quite a happy ending, but it was a stressful period because we knew that we'd done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like an old kit version of VAR, I suppose.
Well,
justice of science.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, my dad's just had the first COVID vaccine and he's getting awesome Wi-Fi now. Don't know why. But so you started at Puma early 2000s. Were you at Umbro before?
No, so I was Puma 2001 till 2007, and then worked very briefly at O'Neill in Holland. Then did a little bit of freelance work. And then when Nike bought Umbro, a little while after the acquisition, I got a call from Nike's head of design recruitment saying that I'd been recommended and would I be interested in talking to them about they were looking to bring somebody in at a design director level over the performance apparel sector. So I went in there and had the interview and got that role. So I was working, it was after they designed and launched the Tailored by England or Tailored by Umbro, kind of all white shirt. Yeah. So I arrived just after that was launched. And then after Nike sold the business, the new owners kept me on and appointed me as creative director. So I was overseeing all of design across apparel, footwear and accessories at that point. And then after doing that for almost 2 years, so I'd been with the brand like just over 5 years, I think in total, around about 5 years. I then moved over to Vancouver and worked for Lulu Lemon for a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, went from football to yoga.
The natural progression.
Yeah, exactly. Just like Brad Friedel, really. And then, then found my way back to the UK. Started a family over there and decided we were too far from home. Came back to the UK and started up our design agency with my business partner, Craig, who designed the 2002 Brazil kit when he was design director of football at Nike. So we are the only design agency in the world that's got back-to-back World Cup winning shirts in our portfolio, which is nice to talk about.
Exactly. That should be the slogan underneath.
Yeah, totally. Which is it's great for sports brands, less so for clients like, Belstaff and Dunhill and other people like that we work with. Slightly less interested in Cameroon kits.
Me, on the other hand. No, but so... You mentioned I lost my train of thought. Oh, Nike. So didn't they try and poach you quite but before leaving Puma?
Yeah, so I had a couple of instances of almost leaving. I'd been with Puma for a couple of years. I'd already got a senior designer position. So this was like probably 2003, I guess. And I got approached by a headhunter on behalf of Adidas. I don't know if anybody's heard this story, but I went right the way through the interview process and was quite excited. I loved Puma, but I was the football fan kid inside me, and the thought of working with Beckham and whoever else they'd got wearing Adidas boots and designing for Germany and Argentina. For the 2006 World Cup, there was a lot of allure to it, and I got as far as they offered me a contract, and then I kind of just my love for Puma and the people I was working with really kicked. It was probably my Fabian Delph sliding doors moment, I guess, where I was certain I was going to leave, and then told Puma I was going to leave, and the head of our department at the time figured out matching the terms that I'd been offered at Adidas and was like, if we take money off the table, where do you want to be? They mapped out what my future could look like, and it sounded great. So stayed with Puma, and then probably 18 months later got headhunted again, this time for Nike. And again, they were doing all these amazing adverts at the time with Eric Cantona in the cage and whatever else. And I was like, I wouldn't mind a bit of that. Again, the football fan kid inside me quite fancied it. And I was going through that interview process, and then my now business partner, Craig, he'd worked for Puma earlier in his career before then going to Nike to do football. And he'd then been at Rip Curl and found his way back to Puma as creative director. And the recruiter that was working on behalf of Nike was really good friends with Craig. And so when he rocked up there, she was like, look, as we're friends, one of your team is potentially about to move across to Hilversum, where the office was at that time, and you might want to have a chat with him. So I sat down with Craig and, talked about what I wanted to achieve with the business. And yeah, we figured it out. I never got as far as discussing terms or anything with Nike at that point, at least. But yeah, so me and Craig then go back 15 years or more, I guess, now. But yeah, it was the Adidas one's a funny one because I'd never really thought of it like that. But if I'd have gone and worked for Adidas, I would have been sat here now as somebody that designed a World Cup runner-up shirt rather than a World Cup winner. So yeah, I guess perhaps it was fate that I decided not to stray.
And the slogan wouldn't have been as good. We've got a
No.
and a runner-up.
Yeah, exactly.
So talking about the World Cup winner shirt, we'll quickly gloss over that, as I'm sure you spoke about it many times. But what was the design process about that like? And I mentioned that I was doing this interview to someone who I had on last episode, Paul from PFC Vintage. He's based down in Australia, but his family's from Italy. And he wanted to find out about the elastic in the Italy shirts.
Yeah.
I think that's the word. I don't know. I've lost the message now. It was either elastic or plastic. It was one of the two, but he was curious as to why.
Yeah. So it was fully bonded. So it was the first ever fully bonded football shirt. So it meant the seams were glued together instead of stitched. So the brief was get players to the ball faster. And that wasn't just for Italy. That was every Puma team. And it's still their thing now, forever faster, right the way across the business. And it kind of started there, really. And so, yeah, we just kind of challenged convention in terms of how do you design a football shirt? What does it look like? And just geared around how do we get players to the ball faster? So there were certain things that we knew would work, and there were certain things that were a happy accident. So one of the things we were keen on doing was around moisture wicking and helping sweat to evaporate more quickly. And so we collaborated with Manchester Metropolitan University to design a material with a Japanese company called Toray, who'd got an office in just outside Derby. So we worked with them and built this material, and it was a ripstop structure. So it got the grid within it. And the intention was that it would have one-way stretch around the body so that the players had kind of freedom of movement, but there wasn't enough stretch for somebody to grab the shirt and hold on to it. And the grid structure was just to help it not rip when people were pulling at it. And as it turned out, the grid structure helped the liquid to move more quickly around the shirt. So if you've got one of those shirts somewhere, if you put a drop of water onto it, you can see the water travel more quickly up the grid structure than it does inside the little squares, which was a happy accident. And then a while later, when we came to test it in a wind tunnel, we found that the grid structure was creating almost like the surface of a golf ball, where you've got the dimples of a golf ball actually make the ball more round than if it was round. So air gets trapped in those little pockets and creates a perfectly smooth surface around the ball, which makes it more aerodynamic. And so we'd inadvertently done that with the shirt, where it was creating small pockets of air. So it made it really like a flat surface rather than a structured one. We put the collar on back to front. We had the elasticated panel over the back, which was really just purely about lateral motion for the upper arms, because any further down the back, you don't need that amount of movement. And it was all just about keeping air out of the shirt so that it didn't hinder aerodynamics, like driving your car with the windows open. Reduced weight and make sure that the shirt didn't gain weight over the course of a game. So we, from a weight perspective, it was half a Snickers lighter than any other shirt at the World Cup. And that's when Snickers were quite big and they didn't have to put two in a packet to fill you up. And we also tested it in a low velocity wind tunnel, and it was over a 30-meter sprint. I think you'd get to the ball 70 centimeters ahead of the opponent. I forget the exact statistics now, but just purely based off the aerodynamics of it. And then with it being so thin, it wet out quite quickly, but it didn't gain a lot of weight over the course of a game. Whereas in a heavier knitted football shirt, gets wet and it gets heavier and heavier. So you're tired and you're carrying more weight around with you. And it just all adds up. That was the way we sold it into the teams, was this half a Snickers, where it was like, you wouldn't dream of taping this to the front of Cannavaro's shirt before a match. Be ridiculous. So why would you put him in a heavier kit? And it's just as simple as that to get people signed off on it.
Oh, fair. And famously, Cannavaro is more of a Mars fan anyway. But so the actually, we'll go through some kits that you've designed first before going on to Spark Academy. So are there any kits that you have which you designed which people might not know you had a part to play in?
Oh man, there's all sorts of some of the random teams we work with, especially during the early days at Puma, because when I rocked up there, like Cameroon and Monaco were the biggest teams, or the most famous. Or Lazio actually was the big deal, because they were still, that was like Crespo, Veron, Nesta era. So Lazio were the big one, and then kind of Cameroon weren't a successful team, but people were familiar with them still because of Italia 90. So we were then working on some of these random teams like Boa Vista and Sturm Graz and people like that, these days you'd never have, like, your lead designers at a brand like Puma wouldn't be touching teams like that. But it was what we'd got. I think we had like 4 national teams at about 5 clubs. So I would say the more random ones like that, Angola, just assorted people. Probably the same again at Umbro, where it was a little bit of a smaller brand. So even when I left there, we were working on, I forget which team it was, might have been West Coast Mariners or somebody like that. So a fair few kind of random ones. I guess what's less familiar from my career is the stuff outside of football, even when I was at Puma. So I designed the outfit that Usain Bolt wore in Beijing in 2008. So when he was first doing his Bolt celebration and smashing his world records, although I'd left Puma, that was one of the last things I designed. And also managed the team that were designing for Formula One. So was overseeing the guys that were creating the pilot suits for Michael Schumacher and people like that. So yeah, had a lot of fun on some amazing projects, but people tend to just want to talk about Italy and Cameroon because they were the ones that got all the headlines. But the Usain Bolt one did as well, but I'll talk about that less more because there's less athletics kit collectors than there are football kit collectors, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't really have many Puma shirts. I've got the Cameroon piece. I've now got a few pieces from City as well. This being one of my favourites from this year. It's one of the training tops. And I didn't realise how tight it was when I bought it. So I'm glad that the camera.
It looks better on you than it would on me. Don't worry about it.
Stop it, you. But I have this, which the only reason you're probably the best person to speak to about it. I think it's 90s era going off the Puma logo.
Yeah.
But I saw it. The only reason I bought it was because I fell in love with the sleeves. Being like that. And I put a question out on who this team is, and apparently it's just some like non-league team in Belgium. But I just wanted to say I enjoy the sleeves.
Yeah, I feel like perhaps St. Pauli might have had that template at some point, or some team like that, someone who's quite a cool team. And it might even, because St. Pauli had the Jack Daniels sponsorship for a little while. And I feel like there was a white and brown and red version of that. I could be completely imagining it, but because when I got there was still shirts of that era were still framed and all over the corridors at Puma. It was that long ago. I'm so old that when I got there was still like cigarette machines and like beer vending machines in the corridor. Seriously. And then all these old framed shirts of like a Chupa Chups Sheffield Wednesday sponsored number and things like that I presume they're not still hanging around anymore, although they're probably worth a fortune.
Well, yeah. Hopefully they are somewhere. So, but we'll quickly run through some kits as well before going on to Spark Academy. You said that you've got a few to one side.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess kind of one for you as a City fan is this player issue, Mark Vivian Foe Cameroon shirt. So obviously, I don't know whether this ever ended up in his hands or whether it was, just printed for him and taken to a tournament. But obviously that's something. Although I didn't work on this shirt, I still remember that. When that tournament was happening, where Foe was tragically taken away from us. I remember we were sitting outside a bar, and I was with the head of football marketing at Puma, Philip, and he got a phone call from the guys that were on the ground at the tournament, and were telling us, something's happened. And this is like pre-social media, so it wasn't like we could just look on Twitter and check it out. And we were getting the phone call updates as to what was happening. And then, although I never met the guy, we got the phone call as to what had happened and that he passed away. And it was just crazy. I get goosebumps now even talking about it. I remember it so well. So that's definitely one of the shirts that I kind of cherish, even though I didn't design it. And, it was just quite a moment to be so close to something that was such a, crazy moment, a ridiculous thing to happen. And just having, albeit a tiny speck of a role in the tapestry of it, it was nuts. Other things I've got that I'm proud of. This was like my first full concept as a professional designer, was this Accelerator Kit that was done for the 2004 European Championships. This is the Czech Republic version of that. Quite a few teams wore this kit. I think we did it for Lazio as well. And I was very proud of that at the time, very technical looking and designed to increase arm lift, etc. But at that point, as a designer, I was still more focused on like cut lines and angles and things looking dynamic, rather than kind of evolved into a place of actually making things better for athletes. So yeah, that was an interesting little period of just moving cut lines around for the fun of it. And then I've got this locally produced. It hasn't even got a Puma label in the back of it, although we designed it. Sleeveless training jersey that was for Tunisia for the World Cup. And it's got Tunisia written on the back in Arabic text, which part of the idea for the World Cup was, and nobody ever calls us out on the fact that everybody was wearing a template, but basically like this kit, every team had this template, and we got away with it because, apart from the Italy away kit, we got away with it because we knew that it was a template and it wasn't what we wanted to do, but because it was a performance solution, it's like, well, this is the best answer, so we don't really want to mess around with it. So what we figured out was, by putting the graphic on the front that was relevant to each team, that it made it a bespoke shirt, irrespective, it wasn't just their colours or a unique away kit colourway. So we took two angles. One was with the training line, we wanted to have the country name on the back in their native tongue. So I think Tunisia were the only ones that qualified. Perhaps Ivory Coast as well had it in French on the back. But we'd got a few that were going to look really cool if they'd qualified. So Bulgaria didn't qualify, so they didn't get it. But we'd got that written in Cyrillic on the back. And it was actually a embarrassing story at the time, although it is quite funny, where we went out to present the designs to the Bulgarian Federation, and Hristo Stoichkov was coach at the time. So he was there for the presentation. It was a fairly small room at the Hilton Hotel in Sofia. And went through all the presentation with Stoichkov, and it was a difficult one because he was up for challenging everything. It was one of those things where if you had a black cat, he'd got one that was blacker, and so there was always something to challenge, and you've got all these kind of support team around him, and of course they all agreed with Stoichkov because he's Hristo Stoichkov. I'm just a brummie. And so we got all the way to the end, and we talked about how it was going to be bespoke and unique, and we showed them the back of the thing, and we'd taken the back of the jacket, and we'd taken the word from the crest, the Federation crest, and it was supposed to say we thought it said Bulgaria in Cyrillic, and they all burst out laughing. And because the badge said Bulgarian Football Association, the back of the jacket said Bulgarian instead of Bulgaria, which they thought was hilarious. But in hindsight, I'm like, I quite like that. It would have been nice to have gone with like an England jacket with English on the back of it, or an Ireland jacket with Irish. It's almost got more power than just having the country name, but sadly it never came to life. But so that's why we've got Arabic on the back of it. Tunisia one was, it was all part of the personalisation program that we did. And then I guess the last one that I worked on that a lot of people haven't seen, although it has had a bit of traction on social media recently, is this ill-fated Italy third jersey that they only wore once for an away defeat in Iceland in, I think, late 2004. It was Marcello Lippi's first game in charge of the Italian national team. And we created this. This was when the collaboration with Neil Barrett first started on the Italy product. And he fully designed all of that. I was only responsible for kind of bringing it to life and getting it made. So that was entirely his design, and it's a great piece of design work. But it was positioned to only sell at 40 stores worldwide. It was sold like fashion retailers. It was sold in a box. It was over €200 a pop at the time. I mean, it was an expensive piece of kit, really limited edition. I think the players got more made for them than was made for retail, and they wore it away in Iceland and lost in it. And then vowed they would never wear it again because it was an unlucky shirt. So that was it, and it just disappeared. And I've only ever seen one. I've got the short sleeve and the long sleeve of it, and I've only ever seen one other, which is a Italy shirt collector based out in Hong Kong who's got one on his blog. And I've got the matching pair. But part of the reason for showing them today is I didn't design them, so I'm not bothered about keeping them. So if anybody loves Italy shirts and wants to make me a ludicrous offer for two of the rarest shirts you could possibly want, hit me up on Twitter or any other social media channel, because I will sell them for the right money.
Selling your wares on here.
Exactly. Exactly. Everything's an opportunity.
Well, that's fine. Let's continue to sell yourself with the Spark Academy. Look at that transition. Yeah. Silky smooth. So who and what is Spark Academy?
Well, Spark Design Academy is... it was the brainchild of Craig and myself during the pandemic, where we were having one of our long chats over Viber, which is the messaging service that we use and talk a lot on that every day because he's based up in Scotland. And we were talking about how people are just missing out, particularly students are missing out on work experience, and even young professionals are missing out on work experience by having to work from home. And I've always thought I was very lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had, but also I put myself in a position to get lucky, if that makes sense. And so, there's so many people that weren't getting to have the exposure of sharing an office with a brilliant creative director or whatever else. Even if they're reporting into them, they're working from home. And then the conversation evolved into, if we were to leave the industry, then all our experience leaves with us. So what's the legacy that we can leave behind that would, that would kind of help people and benefit people from the experience we've got. So we came up with the idea of an e-learning platform where we would film a series of courses and eventually invite other people with other specialisms like football boot design, for instance, to create courses and offer them online where people can pay to do the course. They would then complete it in their own time. If there's an optional project affiliated to it, they can send it in to us and get feedback on that. And we decided to start with kit design, football kit design, because obviously the history of the two of us that I've touched upon, and also just seeing the passion and enthusiasm of concept kit designers online and the quality of the work. But alongside that, when I finished designing kits, so my last kit designs probably went on field in about 2016, and the concept thing was starting to really gather some momentum then. And you'd get a lot of comments, and still do on social media, of, oh, well, why have the brand done that and not this concept design that's so much better? And so I always wanted to be on a one-man crusade to answer that on behalf of all the designers, of like, oh, well, if you printed that, so like even the print on the shoulders of your top there, if that ran onto the main body of the garment across the seam on the front here and had to match up, that had cost a fortune. First of all, for the amount of fabric that would get wasted to position the pattern piece to cut out to get it to make. Then the machinist taking so long to slowly run it through. And yet on Photoshop, well, of course it matches up. Why wouldn't it? And so, there's things like that. There's the impact of what the players or the manager or the club president wants. There's what the sponsor wants. There's what the brand needs. There's so many different factors that go into it. And so we thought, first of all, there'd be a passion out there for what we can talk about with people who are already doing concept designs to a high standard, but really want to be able to understand how to kick it onto the next level. And then the second aspect of that for us was, if we get people through who really are good enough to go and do it professionally, perhaps we can leverage our contacts in the industry and put people in touch, because they've then not only got a beautiful portfolio of stuff they've done on Photoshop and got 1 billion likes on Twitter, but also by having done the course, they've got that understanding of being able to design commercially, because you have got to hit a certain target price, you have got to follow the regulations, you have got to ensure that the colours between home, away and third are different enough than whoever else is in your group at the World Cup. And there is so much that has to go into it. So we just wanted to kind of blow the lid off that a little bit, and it's taken off really well. And we've had our first set of graduates have gone through and submitted projects to us, and the standard overall was really high. We've had people from all over the world, some of whom are already well known within the kit concept design industry. A couple of people are already working as pros and have done for quite some time and wanted to just learn how me and Craig have done it. A couple of people who no experience at all of design software, just love football kits and wanted to have a go at it or learn more about the process. So there's plenty of angles into that as a course. And the next 2 courses that we'll be launching fairly soon are more universal, I guess, in terms of the skills that they offer. So we're going to teach people how to build a world-class presentation and how to master the art of presenting. Because obviously we've had to stand in front of the English FA, the Italian Federation, Ferrari, Craig talk. Sorry,
Stoichkov.
Yeah, I mean Stoichkov at Manchester City. I've presented to Roberto Mancini, to Caldoun with his younger brother in there, who was calling all the shots because he was cool and had got limited edition Jordans on his feet. Craig flew out to South Korea thinking he was meeting a group of journalists, and he was taken to the football stadium and put on a stage in front of 2,000 people. Unexpected, straight off a flight. So, we've had a lot of experience of how to sell ideas to people and do it in a very visual way, because that's how we operate. We've been on presentation courses and gained little from them because it didn't suit the way that we communicate. So we wanted to blow the doors off that a little bit and help people create visual documents, whether that's for on-screen or handouts, that are clear to understand and sell the idea or process or action that you're wanting to sell to people. And also to help people get that confidence of being able to stand up in front of one other person and ask for a pay rise, or 2,000 South Korean football fans, and explain why you've designed what you've designed. So that will be coming soon as well. And as part of that, there'll be a big rollout of other courses later in the year. But we started with football kits because it's a big passion of ours, and we knew that there'd be a lot of people really interested in getting involved in it for what it is, rather than just for wanting to further their careers.
It could have been worse. It could have been North Korea. But With the design that you mentioned with the lining up from the front to the shoulders, is that one of the reasons why most designs don't go onto the back, or is that to do with also kit regulations?
Can be all sorts, can be kit regulations, which vary from federation to federation, year to year. So I don't know if it's still the same now, but certainly when I finished designing kits as recently as 5 years ago, there was still different regulations on how, like the Puma cat was measured between FIFA and UEFA. So one of them measured it in a square. It's allowed to be 25 square centimeters. And one of them measured it in a box. And one of them measured it where you cut off the negative space. So the cat fits within a parallelogram. So instead of having a straight bottom edge, you take it from pore to pore, which means you can go slightly bigger. So that meant we would then have to make a call on if a team was playing in both UEFA and FIFA competitions, then we could either have different products with different sized cats on, or just wear a smaller cat than we were allowed to for the, to fit both criteria. So there can be a regulation aspect to it. It can be cost. Printed material obviously costs more than material that hasn't been printed. And then if it is a difficult pattern to match up, then that can be problematic as well. I remember doing one of the last designs I did was for Peru at Umbro, and I wanted to do a stripe that the sash that wrapped around, so it would hit the side seam a little bit higher up and then come around to the back and almost be like not a barber's pole where it was all the way around, but certainly it would wrap around the body. And even that was just one stripe that we had to match up at the seams, and it was just making it too expensive in production because, if you get that a few millimeters out, it just looks rubbish. So we couldn't do it. And then the other challenge that you can face with these things is with color matching as well. So printing a sky blue versus dyeing a sky blue onto a main body material versus dyeing it onto a knitted rib collar. I mean, the chances of getting those three to match up perfectly are so slim. So you would then try and create little bits of negative space in between where those two, they could even only be 10% out. So if there's even 20 mil between them, it's fairly imperceptible, but you put them right next to each other and people will spot it straight away. So there can be all manner of reasons, some of which are planned for and some of which come up when you get your first prototypes.
Because I spoke to the Vancouver Whitecaps kitman in this series, and he was on about how MLS or the broadcast companies don't like the fact that their home shirt last season, they've just had a new one, but the band went all the way around.
Yeah, with the red number through it.
Yeah, and apparently it made it harder to spot on harder to see the number anyway.
Yeah, totally. And it's totally varied as well, where it could depend. Originally when I started, you had to have a box in the back that was big enough for a name and number. So I think we did Paraguay, maybe had a red and white striped shirt, and it just had a big white or red panel on the back. And then I feel like at the same tournament, if I've imagined this, then I apologise and hopefully nobody sues me. But I feel like at the same tournament, Argentina showed up and had stripes on the back and not a box, because it looked fine with a name and number on, but as a replica it looked terrible because you've just got a big white box on the back. And Argentina showed up with the stripes, and the official response as to how they got away with it was, oh, well, it's sky blue and white, so when you put a black number over it you can see it and it's fine. Whereas we thought perhaps there were other reasons for it than that. But yeah, it can totally vary. One of the rudimentary tricks that we would do in terms of making sure there was visibility of numbers and there was enough difference between home and away shirts was just putting them on a black and white photocopier, because you then, and to be fair with the Argentina example, if you put a sky and white striped shirt with a black number on a photocopier, a black and white photocopier, you'd see the number really clearly. The sky almost disappears. Whereas with the Whitecaps example from last season, I mean, beautiful shirt, absolutely loved it. But I can imagine from a broadcaster's or even a referee's perspective, it'd be quite difficult.
Right, okay. I've got the shirt, but it's got no print on the back.
Yeah.
But last few things to cover before we finish. If someone would like to find Spark Academy or get involved, where is the best place to do so?
So head to sparkdesignacademy.com and you'll be able to find information about, right now, just about the football kit design course. But also fairly soon you'll be hearing about the presentation skills courses as well. So there'll be a newsletter that you can sign up to there to keep informed about it. And as time goes on, we're going to be building a community where people don't have to subscribe to the courses to pick up bits of information and learn a few tips and tricks that can either build them a bit of social currency when they're talking about kits, or hopefully help them learn a few professional skills as well that will serve them whatever they do for a living.
Well, I feel like I've learned a lot and I've not even subscribed. But you're sending a voice, right? So one of the other things I wanted to ask was just quickly striking while the iron is hot in terms of the community. The latest Puma leak of having the badge and the crest together.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your take on that.
I like it. I think I like it more than having the Italia wording underneath it as well. From the one that I've seen, feels like overkill. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. I mean, we used to play a lot with where we would position logos and crests and whether you'd stack them up on top of each other or have them spaced out, particularly for a World Cup where you've got a number on the front as well. And I guess that would be, because right now people, I don't think it's been confirmed that it's definitely going to be the kit.
I don't think so.
And something that would make me question it is you've got to have a number on the chest, and I don't know where that's going to go. And if they're thinking they'll put it to one side, it's going to look pretty unbalanced, in my humble opinion. If you've got a block of information here and then a fairly big, especially when you start getting, we always used to work with number 22 because it was pretty much the widest number block you'd work with. And if you've got a honking great big 22 here and then a badge and a cat and then the word Italia underneath it, it might look lopsided. But I mean, the team there are good. They will have done the work and they know how that's going to look. I mean, looking at the visual I've seen, it looks great, but thinking through the practicalities, it'll be interesting to see how it shows up. If it shows up.
Well, exactly, and there were also rumours that it was going to go to club level as well. So I wouldn't mind. I find it funny how people are adverse to that, but with England and then Nike below, they're fine with it being like that, but together, no.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I saw one comment where, and it may even have been you that had said it, that it looks more like a kind of kit reveal announcement, where, you know, that's how it would be presented, our new technical sponsor and whatever, or a collaboration. So I can see the value in that, of somebody looking at those and thinking, oh, that'd be quite cool actually on the front of a shirt. Something that used to keep us away from stacking them up on the front of a shirt, of having one above the other, was it was very restricted in terms of what you could do with the collar, because obviously if you wanted a polo neck or whatever, then it'd have to drop down quite low. And also you could never be sure who the sponsor was going to be, or, you know, from team to team, for a particular team, you'd know who it was and how long was left to run on the deal. But if I think back again to working with like Sturm Graz in Austria at the start of my career, they had a sponsor logo that came up quite high. It was quite tall on the front of the shirt. So if we put anything in the middle, it would have created a big issue. Again, you know where you stand with national teams, but with club sides, it can be problematic because you just don't know what's going to show up on the front, as evidenced by another shirt I've got here next to me, which is absolutely horrible and destroyed by the sponsor logo.
Well, I was going to mention the RB Leipzig shirt this year with the lightning bolt, where it just looks uneven because of the big Red Bull logo in the middle. Yeah. But my last question is, restrictions are being lifted now, so it's not as tough anymore. But one of the big industries that was hit last year was the arts industry. So each episode, I'd get the guests to recommend a song, artist, or album for anyone after this to go check out.
Yeah.
So who is your song, artist, or album?
Am I allowed two? Because they're both people that.
As many as you want.
Cool. So there's a couple of people. There's a guy that I went to school with called Tennant, and you can find him on Twitter. He's a massive Tottenham fan, despite going to school with me in Sutton Coldfield. But he's got a really nice sound to him. He's clearly inspired by having grown up in the 90s, and he was a massive Suede fan at school. But his sound has evolved beyond that, and it kind of speaks back to that era of Britpop and, you know, classic, I guess, 90s British rock, but it feels contemporary as well. So you can find him on Twitter. I forget his handle, but I'm sure we can dig it out and put it up somewhere. So Tennant is one. And then somebody else is a fellow Villa fan called Emma Flowers, who she sings. It's more kind of folky ballads that she sings. She's got a really distinctive voice. It's quite a powerful voice, but she talks about sings about quite sensitive topics and plays quite a delicate at times guitar with it. So it's a real kind of, I hate to use the word juxtaposition because it makes me sound like a designer tosspot, but the balance between her voice and the music and what she's singing about is really quite unique and distinctive. So Tennant and Emma Flowers would be the two people I would say go and have a look. You'll definitely find them on Twitter and Bandcamp. Go and give them 99p or whatever their, you know, one of their records costs, and, you know, help out people that are being forgotten by our government that don't care about the arts. They only care about lining their own pockets, allegedly.
I mean, I tweeted this morning saying that they do dodgier contracts than Ed Woodward. I think that was probably one of the best tweets I've ever done.
Yeah, it's a fair share of that, yeah.
So finally, if anyone would like to find you on the social medias, interwebs, where is the best place for them to do so?
So definitely not Instagram. I only use Instagram for family stuff. So it's locked. If you send a request to follow me on there, I'll say no. It'll be a polite decline. Don't be offended. It's just you probably don't want to look at pictures of my kids. Or I hope you don't anyway. And then I've got Twitter. You can find me Real Rob Warner on there. Spark Design Academy also has a Twitter account you can follow. And also, if you want to actually go directly to the Spark Design Academy website, you'll be able to find a link in the description and also in any accompanying tweets and social media with this. Click that link, it'll take you straight away through to the Design Academy page, where you'll be able to find out a bit more about me and Craig, more about the courses we offer, and see some of the examples of the lectures on the curriculum too.
Perfect. So all links will be in the description, your social media links, and that link to go sign up, because the Design Academy, from what I've seen, very exciting. I've been asked a few times if I could design a kit, what would I do? But I don't think I'm that imaginative yet. So maybe you
need to sign up to the course and put yourself to the test. We've actually, out of the first bunch of graduates, we've had a couple that were of such a high standard, people that aren't kit designers already. There's one guy that we've potentially got him a conversation with one of the big brands about having a chat with him about his work.
Oh, wow.
A lad he's always loved football kits, but never dreamed he could do it for a living. So he's come and done the course, transformed his approach to designing kits, and should hopefully in the next few weeks be having a chat with one of the big boys.
Right, I'm going to design the next one piece. Right, so thank you very much for joining us, for joining me, and watching this, listening to this. If you're watching on YouTube, then please like, comment, maybe subscribe if that's too far.
Share as well. Spread the gospel.
But yeah, share it as well. Do what he says. And if you're listening on an audio platform, then thank you very much. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It will drop into your subscription feed or your podcast feed every time I release an episode, as I don't really have a consistent list on this at the moment while things are opening back up and everyone's back to work. It's harder to nail down interviews, but they'll still happen. Don't worry. But once again, Rob, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for watching, listening, and we will see you soon.